In 2006, the world's largest retailer quietly packed up its bags and fled Germany. Walmart, a company doing $345 billion in annual revenue, with more stores than most countries have towns, walked away from 85 locations, absorbed a $1 billion loss, and handed everything to a local competitor it had spent nearly a decade failing to beat. German shoppers barely noticed they were gone. This wasn't a fluke. Across the Atlantic, a pattern has repeated itself so many times by so many companies that it's almost become predictable. American giants arrive in Europe with money, ambition, and the absolute certainty that what worked at home will work abroad. And then, one by one, they discover that Europe isn't just a different geography. It's a fundamentally different game. Best Buy, eBay, Groupon, Google, Meta. The list of American companies that have failed, shrunk, or been fined into submission in Europe is longer than most investors would like to admit. So, what is it about Europe? This wealthy, educated, consumer-hungry continent that turns American winners into cautionary tales. To understand why American companies fail in Europe, you have to start in Germany in 1997 because no story captures this phenomenon better or more brutally than Walmart's attempt to conquer the German market. Walmart didn't just enter Germany, it arrived like a conquering general. The company spent nearly $1.5 billion acquiring two German retail chains, Wertkauf and Interspar. Overnight, Walmart had 85 stores, thousands of employees, and a presence in the heart of Europe's largest economy. The plan was simple. Do exactly what they'd always done. Undercut everyone on price, scale fast, and crush the competition. But Germany wasn't Kansas. The first crisis came not from competitors, but from Walmart's own management playbook. Executives from Bentonville, Arkansas flew in with training manuals written in English. In a country where, for legal and practical reasons, all employment materials needed to be in German, they installed American managers who didn't speak the language. They introduced the Walmart employee cheer, a morning ritual where staff chanted the company name in unison, which German workers viewed as something closer to humiliation than motivation. Then came the smile policy, mandatory smiling at customers, which in German retail culture reads not as friendliness, but as unsettling and fake. But the strangest culture clash of all was the anti-fraternization policy. Walmart tried to prohibit romantic relationships between managers and subordinates, a rule that German labor courts ruled was an invasion of employees' private lives. The German trade union Ver.ai filed official complaints. Workers held protests. Walmart had somehow managed to alienate its own workforce before it had even established a customer base. And on the competitive side, things were even worse. Walmart's core superpower, price, had already been weaponized by two German companies that most Americans had never heard of, Aldi and Lidl. These discount chains had spent decades perfecting the art of razor-thin margins on a limited product range. They weren't just cheaper than Walmart, they were cheaper in a way that Walmart, with its higher labor costs and massive store footprint, structurally could not match. Then there were the legal constraints. Germany's Ladenschlussgesetz, the shop closing law. In 2006, after years of losses estimated at over $1 billion, Walmart sold every German store to local rival Metro AG and announced its complete withdrawal from the country. The press release was corporate and measured. The reality was a rout. Walmart's failure was dramatic, but for most American companies entering Europe today, the greatest threat isn't culture shock. It's a legal system specifically designed to make their business models illegal. The European Union operates with a fundamentally different philosophy about the relationship between corporations, citizens, and the state. In America, regulators generally intervene after harm has been proven. In Europe, regulators act preemptively, and they are not afraid to hit the largest companies in the world where it hurts most. The balance sheet. Google discovered this the hard way. Between 2017 and 2019, the European Commission issued 3 separate antitrust fines against the company totaling more than 8 billion euros. The first, 2.42 billion euros, was for manipulating search results to favor its own shopping service. The second, 4.34 billion euros, the largest antitrust fine in EU history at the time, for bundling Google apps with Android phones and effectively locking out competitors. The third, 1.49 billion euros, for restricting rival advertisers in its search ad platform. Each fine was for something Google did everywhere, but only in Europe was it illegal. Then came GDPR. When the General Data Protection Regulation went into effect in May 2018, it didn't just change how websites collected data, it restructured the entire business model of surveillance capitalism. For American tech companies whose revenue depended on harvesting, profiling, and monetizing user data at scale, GDPR was an existential challenge. Meta received a €1.2 billion fine in 2023, the largest GDPR penalty ever issued, for transferring European user data to American servers in violation of EU data protection law. And in 2022, the EU passed the Digital Markets Act, which goes further still. It designates certain tech companies as gatekeepers, companies so dominant that they require special regulation, and imposes structural obligations on how they operate. The law names Apple, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and ByteDance. Every major gatekeeper on the list, except ByteDance, is American. The pattern here isn't coincidence. Europe has built a regulatory architecture that doesn't just regulate American companies. It fundamentally challenges the mechanisms through which those companies generate profit. And for companies that arrive unprepared, the fines aren't just expensive, they're existential. There's a third failure mode that gets less attention, but is just as lethal, underestimating the companies that were already there. When Best Buy announced its entry into the United Kingdom in 2010, it looked like a sure bet. The company was the dominant electronics retailer in North America. It had brand recognition, supply chain muscle, and the capital to build out stores across the UK. Its joint venture with Carphone Warehouse, a well-established British mobile retailer, seemed to give it local credibility. It opened its first UK flagship in Thurrock, Essex in April 2010. The store was enormous by British retail standards. It offered expert staff, product demonstrations, and the classic Best Buy blue and yellow experience transplanted directly from the American suburbs. British consumers were unimpressed. The problem wasn't the stores, it was the landscape. The UK market for consumer electronics was already deeply competitive, dominated by Currys and PC World, and increasingly by Amazon. British shoppers weren't waiting for an American big box format. They'd already built their own version, and they were rapidly migrating online anyway. Best Buy had arrived with a format optimized for American suburban car culture in a country where most people lived within walking distance of a high-street electronics shop or simply ordered online. By November 2012, barely 2 years after opening, Best Buy closed every single UK store. Losses had mounted to over €60 million. The joint venture was dissolved. Best Buy has never attempted a European expansion since. The same trap caught eBay across multiple European markets, where local competitors like Germany's Otto Group and France's Labancoin had spent years building trust with local consumers in ways eBay's platform never managed to replicate. In market after market, the assumption that American scale automatically translates to local dominance proved dangerously wrong. Here's where the story gets genuinely complicated, because not every American company fails in Europe. Some of the most recognizable American brands in the world are deeply embedded in European life. McDonald's has more than 8,000 locations across Europe. Apple's retail stores draw long queues in London, Paris, and Berlin. Netflix has become a fixture of European living rooms. So, what did they do differently? The honest answer is that the companies that succeed in Europe are the ones willing to dismantle their own assumptions and rebuild around what the local market actually wants, not what they wish it wanted. McDonald's in Europe doesn't look like McDonald's in America. In France, it serves beer. In Germany, it has added local sausage options. The company spent years investing in local sourcing, redesigning its interiors to match European cafe culture, and communicating with consumers about ingredient transparency in ways it rarely needed to do at home. In a 2012 interview, the company's European president acknowledged directly that the French market had forced the company to completely rethink its positioning, and that the lessons learned there ultimately made the brand stronger globally. Netflix's situation is even more instructive. The EU's Audiovisual Media Services Directive requires streaming platforms to dedicate at least 30% of their European catalog to European-made content. For a company built on Hollywood blockbusters and American drama, this was initially a constraint. Netflix turned it into a competitive advantage. It invested heavily in local language productions, Spanish series, German thrillers, French dramas that not only satisfied regulators but generated globally viral content. Money Heist, a Spanish Netflix original, became one of the most watched shows in the platform's history. The contrast with Walmart is stark. Walmart saw Germany as a market to be entered. Netflix saw Europe as a market to be understood. Return to that image of Walmart in 2006. 85 empty stores, $1 billion in losses, and a press release that tried to make an embarrassing retreat sound like a strategic decision. What makes this story more than just corporate failure is what it reveals about a broader assumption, that size, capital, and proven success in one market automatically transfer to another. That if something worked in Houston, it will work in Hamburg. Europe has exposed that assumption as dangerous again and again. The continent is not one market but 27, each with its own legal system, consumer culture, competitive history, and relationship with American brands. It has a regulatory philosophy that treats corporate power with fundamental suspicion. It has local companies that have been building customer trust for decades, and it has consumers who, unlike anywhere else in the world, have a collective willingness to choose the domestic option out of principle. The companies that thrive here are the ones that arrive with humility, that accept the regulatory framework as a condition of doing business, not an obstacle to be lobbied away, that invest in local talent, local content, local adaptation, that understand that being big in America makes you visible in Europe, but it does not make you competitive. The graveyard of American retail ambitions in Europe is full of companies that were too successful at home to believe they could fail abroad. The ones still standing learned something harder to teach than any business strategy, that knowing your own market isn't the same as knowing someone else's, and that gap can cost you $1 billion before you even realize it exists.